Hello, everybody. My name is Nemuna Ceesay. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and welcome to the second conversation about comedy of errors. I am the founder and one of the core collaborators of an organization called The Blueprint, which is an all BIPOC training program. We're a network of professional working artists who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, dedicated to providing comprehensive, holistic training to emerging artists from our communities. And I'm super excited because we at The Blueprint have been collaborating with Black Girls Love the BARD, and what they are doing, what they are curating over these next 3 months really, is a virtual series, a virtual reading series, reframing, reimagining, and examining Shakespeare through the lens of BIPOC women and non-binary folks. And so that's why we're here today. The first virtual reading of Comedy of Errors, the play on translation by Christina Anderson, dropped yesterday. And so now we're here with a couple of folks that I just really, really respect and value them as artists and people to just chat about not only this particular reading, but also just joy and comedy and why we need it right now and what it means to be a BIPOC person saying these words. And so, yeah, I'm super excited about this conversation. I want to go ahead and give it over to my guests to introduce themselves. Before we do that, I will do a little bit better intro of myself. So my name is Nemuna Ceesay. Like I said, my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am on unceded Munsee Lenape land, often referred to as Hoboken, New Jersey. And like I said, I'm the founder of The Blueprint. I'm also an actor and an educator and super excited to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Dawn Monique Williams first.
Hey, thanks, Nemuna. I'm so thrilled to be invited to participate in this conversation. I am Dawn Monique Williams. My pronouns are she, her. Today, I'm zooming in from the Nipmuc Nation right along the Connecticut River here in Western Massachusetts, but my home is in Oakland, California, which is the unceded Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone land, where I work as the Associate Artistic Director of Aurora Theater Company. And for Black Girls Love the BARD, I am the dramaturg on the production of Macbeth, translated by Migdalia.
Thank you.
I'll pass it. Do you want me to pass it? You're gonna pass it.
No, go pass it, pass it.
I'm gonna pass it to Bree.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to be doing this. I am coming to you. My name's Briawna. Should probably say that. Name's Briawna Jackson. Pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am coming to you from unceded Paiute land out here in the desert, aka Las Vegas. I am an actor and dancer and choreographer, and I have been working alongside with Regroup to have conversations about Shakespeare and bringing it to the modern age. And for Black Girls Love the BARD, I am acting in Comedy of Errors as Luciana and the Abbess. And yeah, I'm going to pass things over to TaiReikca.
Hi, friends. My name is TaiReikca L.A. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I am coming to you from the native lands of the Kumeyaay people, which is also known as San Diego, California. And I am an actor, a stage manager, a writer, a poet, and a theater technician as well. And in Black Girls Love the BARD, I am in the acting company. For Comedy of Errors, I play Gowler, First Merchant, Officer, Angelo, and Luce as well. And happy to be here.
That's awesome. Thank you all. I am so excited that the four of us are on this panel, because something that I just care about so much is, or believe in so much, is that BIPOC folks should be multi-hyphenates. I think everybody should be multi-hyphenates, but I think, for sustainability in the industry so that we really can kind of, take over and change things. Like, I just love the fact that we all do so many things and kind of touch the industry in so many different ways, and each other, in so many different ways. So thank you all. I would love to start us off with just a question that I have about like your own personal relationships to Shakespeare. What sort of background do you have with Shakespeare? Do you love Shakespeare? Do you not love Shakespeare? Do you have kind of an in-between feeling about Shakespeare? Yeah, just like, where do you come from with it? And what are your thoughts today in this moment about doing a play like Comedy of Errors?
Well, I'll jump in, and I'll try and be brief because I feel like the internet already knows my Shakespeare origin story. But when I was a young person, I hated Shakespeare, didn't get it, didn't know why we were studying it, didn't know why we spent so much time on white authored works, and then maybe only got like one Toni Morrison or like the Joy Luck Club, and like that was it. And we had to read like Scarlet Letter and The Great Gatsby. So in high school, I was just like really anti-Shakespeare. And then, at the same time, I was a total theater kid, total theater nerd, but my high school drama teacher was not trying to have us do Shakespeare. We did like big musicals and cool stuff like that. So then I went to university and I was going to be a fancy pants actor and all of that. So I did the summer training congress at ACT, American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, back when it was a 9-week program. And Tommy Gomez, the late Tommy Gomez, my great dear mentor, Tommy Gomez, was like, hey, what about Shakespeare? And I was like, nah, my dude, I'm good. And he was like, well, as an actor of color, you'll get more work doing Shakespeare. And this was in the 90s. I don't know if the statistic is still true, but we do know that Shakespeare is produced more than any other playwright. That statistic is still true. I don't know if the statistic about employment stats for actors of color remain that. I actually hope not. But he was like, well, we're going to work on some Shakespeare. And through his like gentle but stern guidance, I fell in love with it. But it was from the standpoint of an actor, not as an English student in a classroom setting. And I found then as an actor that it was actually challenging in a good way. Like there was a muscularity, like there was meaning in the language, and there was like decoding the text, and not in the way that I have felt in English classes where it's like, I just feel dumb if I don't get it. But it was actually like an invited challenge as an actor to be like, oh, if I lean into this rhythm, I'm creating this meaning. Or if I work opposite of this rhythm, I'm creating this meaning. From there, I really fell in love with it. And then when I made the transition to being a director, I had an even more voracious appetite about it. And then I'll fast forward a bit to right now in this moment. I'm sort of having a lot of unreconciled feelings about it, which is what is so great about what Black Girls Love the BARD is doing, and Play On too, and why I wanted to be involved, because I just am like perpetually haunted by that Audre Lorde quote that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And so I'm on a personal journey of trying to understand what ways I've upheld systems of oppression and how I can deconstruct those systems. And I mean, I literally have Shakespeare tattooed on my arm. Oh, I have on a weird thing so you can't see it. But I have Shakespeare tattoos. Like I have focused so much on Shakespeare that I'm trying to figure out what it is to make space for these translations, to hear these words from more actors of color, to play with how gender is operating in these plays. So in my personal practice, I've been on a pause in terms of directing Shakespeare plays for like 2 years, but have been doing a lot of research and some writing and speaking about opening up Shakespeare and other kind of Western canon stuff to a more multitude of voices. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. What else we got?
I guess I'll jump in next. I think so. I'm being brave today, guys. Let's go. I, much like Dawn, I grew up not liking Shakespeare. I had a really bad experience doing my first Shakespeare play. First Shakespeare play I ever did was Hamlet. And I was living in I just moved from Vallejo, which is like, yeah, I just moved from Vallejo to middle of nowhere, Oregon, to a place that's literally called 10 Mile because it was 10 miles away from the nearest town. Yeah. And we were doing Hamlet, and it was just a very harrowing experience. And it put a really bad taste in my mouth for the duration of high school and all of that. And I also went somewhere where we did a lot of musicals, and that was always my thing, is I was always doing musicals and this, that, and whatever. And then when I got to college, they were like, well, you have to take Shakespeare. And I was like, well, I mean, I want this degree, so okay. And we started working on it, and I was like, I was still really resistant. And Scott Kaiser sat me down at one point and was like, this suits you, so I'm gonna need you to get it together, essentially. And I was like, okay, fine. And we started working on sonnets, and poetry has always spoken to me. Even as a child, I owned more poetry books than anything else. And when we started getting into the sonnets and really looking at it, it hit me in a completely different way. And it changed the way that I looked at the plays. And I really started listening to the language and hearing it in my own voice and seeing it with my own humor. And the more I understood it, the more I started to enjoy it. And especially going to school in Oregon, where I was one of 3 Black people in the whole program, as it goes. I was always encouraged to focus more on work that suited people who looked like me. So even though I was enjoying Shakespeare, I was like, I need to focus on finding and knowing more work for Black people, created by Black people, because in my head, I was like, well, that's what I'm always going to have to deal with. So that's what I should be focusing on. And then Wayne T. Carr, love that man, came in and did like not a seminar, but like a talk to one of our classes in my final year of college. And I asked him, as an artist of color, specifically a Black artist of color, how do you go about like looking at roles, looking at plays, things like that? And that man looked me dead in my eye and was like, don't ever let anyone try to put you in a box. It's like, I do Shakespeare because I love Shakespeare and I do belong there, and no one's going to tell me otherwise. And the fact that I do exactly what roles I want to has gotten me further than anything else. And it was like all the glass shattered, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Why am I listening to all these other people? And so I started really diving more into Shakespeare. And then after college, and then after my time at OSF, moving to New York, even still, I was like, I love Shakespeare, but I've always been a musical person. And turns out the universe or God or whatever you believe in, the ancestors had other plans. Because I have done almost exclusively Shakespeare ever since, which has been a blessing, my best friend and I the other day were talking, and she was like, you know that this is just where you're supposed to be. Like, this is where things sit for you. And I think that's beautiful. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I've accepted that now. I love Shakespeare. I am currently, we're on a break, but I work with Lana Russell and Regroup to talk about Shakespeare and bringing it into now, and why do we do it? Should we do it? What things hold? What things do not? What can we do about the things that we feel we cannot hold? Earlier this year, we did a crossing or like meeting with, why can't I think of the theater that we did a whole series with earlier this year. I'm terrible. It's 8 a.m. Cut me some slack. We did a whole series earlier this year where we got a wide variety of people, from people of color to people not of color, male identifying, female identifying, non-binary, all of the above, to sit down and talk about what Shakespeare play we feel is like the most problematic. Why do we do it? Why do we continue to do it? Should we even do it? You know, all those questions. And then sat down and we're like, okay, in a perfect world where we don't have to follow the exact script, what will we do? How would we change things? Will we change things? Would we cut things? Are we going to add things in? Are we going to completely change the ending? We did Taming of the Shrew. So that face. And it was just a really beautiful thing. And I feel like it has furthered my love for Shakespeare and for the conversation around Shakespeare. So it really prepared me for when I saw the audition post for Black Girls Love the BARD. I was like, oh yeah, have to do that. Need that. Love that. But yeah, so here we are now.
I love it. Thank you. And it's so funny you did Taming of the Shrew, because that was the first one that came to my mind. I was like, Amazing. Thank you. TaiReikca?
Okay, so I'm actually one of those people who started out loving Shakespeare. My first encounter with it, I think I was in 7th grade, and we had to read Macbeth. And the first scene, reading the witches, that line, fair is foul and foul is fair, something, something, the fog and filthy air. I was like, oh my gosh, this is poetry. That is a dope line. Oh, like, I don't, like, nobody else in the class was feeling it, but for some reason that line just stuck out. I'm like, you writing poetry like this? You know, like, I felt like that was some stuff Tupac would have said. So I definitely went along with it. And I can't remember paying attention to like the length to what was actually being said. I just loved how it flowed and how like sometimes it would rhyme. Just I'm a poet by nature, so it's like the poetry in it I was just naturally attracted to. And so and of course I saw Tupac Resurrection, and he mentioned in there like Shakespeare is dope, and I'm like, yes bro, I feel you. So of course, like when we started learning sonnets, I'm like, oh snap, I'm about to remix this so I can give me a little shorty or something, you know. So I've always like had a I know I was a teenager at one point. So I've always had this love for Shakespeare. And of course, like the next play I read was Romeo and Juliet, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so sad. Why do we romanticize this? This is just terrible. Like, and I think that's a challenge for me, like comedies versus tragedies, because like the tragedies always seem to be avoidable. So it's just like, why? But yeah, so I came in with the love of Shakespeare. But of course, you know, as you get older and you start seeing the language, it's like, okay, are we going to have a conversation about this, or are we, but a lot of times it seems I'm in spaces where those conversations don't really get cared, are not really cared to have, you know? And it's usually like we just change the lines or we just cut something, you know? So I think that's one reason I was very, very excited about joining Black Girls Love the BARD. I was like, no, if we're going to do it, let's talk about why we're doing it, you know? And yeah, and also because of, I saw the Othello production that Jamaica had did before. And when I found she was with Black Girls Love the BARD, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to work with this director. I want to do some Shakespeare with her and explore that. But yeah, I've always kind of just had a love for Shakespeare just because of the language. And as I've like started doing more, I've started being able to understand it better, because some, like, just reading it through, like, it doesn't say like where you're at for real, like you gotta like really read through it. So I've started to have fun being able to decipher, like, okay, where could this take place? Okay, what are they really saying? And also I would say also because of Black Girls Love the BARD and what it stands for, like, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Wait, it's coming back. Okay, yes. No, because of what Black Girl Loves the BARD does, and because of what Jamaica did in Othello, I found myself like always like starting to ask those deeper questions about different characters, especially characters of color. Like in Othello, for example, a friend of mine did that show, Nubia, and she played Othello. And I found we were having a lot of conversations about, like, wait a minute, who is Othello really? You know what I'm saying? Because it's like Shakespeare does not know how to write for Black people. He writes from a white fear of Black people and not real Black people. So I found myself like starting to explore that on my own. Like when I read Titus Andronicus, I was like, oh my gosh, who thinks of this? Why would you, what in the world? But then looking at Aaron's character and then looking at Titus's character, I'm like, no, there's a backstory here. There's a backstory to that. Like, just in my own head, I'm like, what did Titus do to Aaron at one point? Because of course in Shakespeare world, he would just write the Moorish character, he would just write them as evil for no reason. You know what I'm saying? Like with Othello, like he writes him ignorant, but it's like, no, Othello is going through a whole bunch of appropriating into white culture trauma. There's a lot that Othello is going through internally to live in this world. And now because of that, Othello is falling for this dude, is just going along with what Iago says. And he's not really thinking, you know what I'm saying? And then like looking at Titus, I'm like, no, there's something else behind there. Something else is motivating him to do this, you know? And I'm like, I want to know that story. So now I have, I would say, a deeper curiosity for Shakespeare and exploring that, like, okay, no, what is the story not being told? You know, a lot of people will when they'll like write their own renditions of Shakespeare stories, and it's about like what happens with the women behind the scenes that we don't see. So I'm more interested in what's happening to the Moorish characters behind the scene, or in that backstory that he would depict them like just one kind of way, you know, like, no, like let's find a way to justify this and actually explain it as opposed to just saying, oh, they're stupid, or oh, they're ignorant, or they're evil. No, there's always a reason behind that. So yeah, so I was like, there's a love, there's an appreciation, there's a confusion, and there's also curiosity. And that curiosity like makes me want to do it more, so we can have more of these conversations. Like, no, yeah, he may have wrote some great stuff, but let's be real about it, and then let's break it down, and then let's see how we can justify and I can't find the word, and just give these characters more than what he just put on the page, if that makes sense. hope that answered the question.
Oh, totally. Yeah, y'all killed it. Y'all killed it. I have so many thoughts. So first of all, you have to watch once it comes out. We're recording this ahead of time, y'all. So it hasn't come out yet, but once it has, the first conversation, Rael, the director of Comedy of Errors, talks about the finally seeing a person of color, a woman of color play Lady Macbeth, Angela Bassett's Macbeth, and how that like completely changed her idea of Shakespeare, because it, like you're saying, TaiReikca, Angela Bassett like brought herself as a woman of color into that role in a way that made it make sense for Rael for the first time. It's like a really incredible story that she tells, but it makes me think of what you're saying, TaiReikca, around like, yeah, like there's a backstory to these characters, and Shakespeare was a white man and was writing from the white perspective. So that brings me to this particular Comedy of Errors that y'all are doing, right? Because it is a play on translation. If y'all watching don't know play on Shakespeare, look it up. It is a play on translation by Christina Anderson, who is a person of color. And so I'm wondering, in the working of this particular script, right, like in rehearsals, do y'all feel like Christina wrote for you, like wrote for people of color in the translating of this story? Or does it still like, does it feel like a translation that's just a translation of a Shakespeare play, which was still written by a white man? What does it feel in it? Do you know what I mean?
For me, it feels like she wrote it for people of color. Like it just, I mean, Shakespeare already flows, but with this, it just, there's that like it factor that it's hard to like explain, like, but I feel she did. And yeah. Briawna, how do you feel?
I was gonna say, I second that. I feel like it would be impossible not to. Even as you're translating or you're writing, we all bring a piece of us into what we're doing, and the Black experience you can't deny. And so I feel like as artists, always, no matter what we do, that's always going to influence everything.
Dawn Monique, I have a question for you around both acting in, but also directing Shakespeare plays, like, from Shakespeare's actual words. Do you feel like as a woman of color, and when you work with actors of color, that they're doing what Briawna says, that it's like, it's inevitable that we end up bringing like all of ourselves to this play and that gets amplified? Or do you feel like there's always some sort of resistance against the language because a white man wrote it?
That's a great question. And first, I just want to back up and say that I've always only ever read Lady M as a Black woman. And I've seen some remarkable Lady M's who weren't Black, and they were remarkable. But from the first time I ever read Lady M, and she's literally like, you must leave the daggers where they lie. She's like, what the? And she's like, my hands are of your color, but I fail to wear a heart so bad. I mean, like, I've always read Lady M as a person of color, a Black woman specifically, because it was very much like, don't be a punk. Like, that's how I've always heard it. That's always how I've always heard it in my head. But yes, so Nemuna, I will try and be brief, because I could do like a whole dissertation on this, because one of the reasons that I sort of pushed pause on directing Shakespeare was because I started internalizing some of the things that were happening in terms of gatekeeping. And so often I felt like my approach to a production was 100% guided by who I am, right? I am a chunky brown girl who grew up in Oakland, California, right? Like, there are certain sounds in my head, certain rhythms. I have a certain understanding of the city versus the country, or, the burbs versus, So I felt like I kept having to serve white male artistic leadership who didn't have the same cultural values or insights or understandings that I did. And I was feeling like, well, some other director could be like, well, I want to put, like, whatever, Pericles on the moon. But if I'm like, but could I just have a little Cardi B? They're like, whoa, 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 whoa. So that's part of even why it's like a little bit on pause, because I got tired of not being allowed to be the cultural authority of my own experience in the room, when we know that Shakespeare can bear the weight of so much. And some directors, mostly white directors, have done the most ludicrous things with Shakespeare, like carte blanche, the most ludicrous things. And it is like applauded. And then a Black director comes and wants like a little trap beat or something like that. And it's all of a sudden like, well, you can't have Drake in a Shakespeare play. And it's like, but what you don't know, what did Ty tell us? Tupac was like the gateway for them into Shakespeare. Like that's what made it make sense. So it was like, these are dope bars, right? Like Shakespeare spits fire. So anyway, when I'm directing anything, not just Shakespeare, but anything. I mean, I just was saying these words to a room full of college kids doing Dance Nation. I do not believe in the sublimation of self. I do not believe in it. You do not have to bury who you are inside of a text. There are some things about our identities that are visible. We are coded that way. They are marked. They have to be present. There are some things about our identities that just, we don't have to lead with that. That's for us. That's our business. Like maybe somebody's religion is present in the way that they dress or adorn, and maybe somebody else's isn't. And so in cases like that, I feel like if your religion is present in the way you adorn, that comes with you to the character. If your religion isn't present, then you have a choice. And you can come to me as a director and say, hey, I know that like I'm not adorned in this way, but this is my faith and it's important to me. And I feel like there's space for that in this character. Great. I feel the same way, like with gender, sexuality, things that for some people is more visible than for other people, but I would never ask somebody to negate that. And in 2017, I did Romeo and Juliet with a cast of brilliant actors. And both Romeo and Juliet were Black, and they wanted a conversation with me ahead of time. And they said, you know, we have been asked in the past in our training, because these were highly trained actors, we have been asked in our training to, you know, do certain things with our voices to sound less Black. And so I really appreciated that they wanted to have that conversation before they even accepted casting, because they were done. And B, just, I felt so much pain that is what training programs have done to actors of color, that makes them feel like they have to neutralize themselves and arrive at this like mid-Atlantic. It's a made up thing. There's no mid-Atlantic dialect. It is made up for Hollywood. It's not real. So why are we asking actors to gravitate toward a stage neutral? It doesn't exist, right? Like if you want a regional dialect for your show, great, hire a professional that can help get your cast there, but stop telling actors of color, Black actors, actors who English is their second language, immigrant actors, actors who might come from the South or who might come from somewhere that has like a really like unique regional sound to adopt something that's not even real. Like work with them from where they're at, work with them on clarity, right? Clarity of thought, clarity of communication. But in any case, I loved what these two actors brought to the role by bringing themselves. The actor who played Romeo, Sadiq Saunderson, who is now on the whole Wu-Tang Clan TV show, getting featured in magazines and stuff. And I'm like, you better let them know it started with Romeo and Juliet, Sadiq Saunderson. But in the balcony scene, she's Adriana Mitchell, goddess. She was a Juliet. She does her line like, but what if my kinsmen find you here? And Sadiq, I mean, just the most hip hop braggadocio. He's like, they are no stop to me. And I just loved it. Like, I didn't care about iambic pentameter, stress here, stress. I was like, yes, because that was authentic to him. Like that kind of posturing, that kind of stance, that's what was real for him in Romeo in that moment. I want actors to bring their whole ass selves, and then we can have a conversation about it. And if somebody's like, well, Dawn, I don't think this character is gay, but I'm gay, and you said I could bring my whole ass up. Well, then the character just got gay. And so then we got to figure it out. You know, I mean, that happened with that thing where the thing was like, well, the actor playing Paris is like, but, and I'm like, oh, come on, bruh. We already know that's an arranged situation. Juliet would be the perfect beard. Like, come on, that makes perfect sense. So that was a very long way of saying I welcome it. And I feel like, you know, we're more confined by contemporary plays, living playwrights who put, you know, more, can put like more kind of rules and things. Shakespeare, it's in the public domain. It's held in the public trust. He already wrote it for like cross-dressing, you know, like literally Cleopatra says, right, for some boy to some pipsqueak boy to, like, it's already inherent in the text. Like, we're all this talk about it's already inherent in the text. Othello was written for a white dude. Like, so like we can do whatever we want. Don't tell me that like a Black woman can't play Lady M when a white man played Othello. All the way up into Bill Pullman just played Othello in like 2014, y'all. It's not even like, oh, 1965. Like, no, y'all, in this century, white men are playing Othello. So Angela Bassett and Ty and Bree and you, Nemuna, y'all should all play all the parts y'all want to play.
Oh, I love that so much, everything you just said. And I just am so, now I'm just like crying that I've never worked with you as a director in the room, but that's okay. We're going to make it happen. We're going to make it happen.
We'll make it happen.
Yes, I love it. Well, on that note, I would love to hear, so I pulled out a little scene from Christina Anderson's translation of Comedy of Errors, and Briawna and TaiReikca are gonna read a little portion of it for us. And we're gonna get to see them bring all themselves to this scene. So let's go ahead and do that scene. Dawn and I will disappear for a second while you do it. And then I would love to talk about like the language of the scene and the comedy in the scene and all of that jazz. So we'll see where we go. Are y'all good? Y'all ready? Great, awesome. Okay, I'm turning off my camera.
Here comes the calendar by which I know my age. What now? Why have you returned so soon?
Returned so soon? Rather, arrived too late. The capon burns. The pig falls from the spit. The clock has struck 12 upon the bell, and my mistress struck 1 upon the cheek. She is so hot because the meat is cold. The meat is cold because you haven't come home. You have not come home because you have no stomach. You have no stomach because you broke your fast. But we who know what it is to fast and pray are remorseful for your offense today.
Stop your tongue, sir. Tell me this, I ask. Where have you left the money I gave you?
Oh, 6 pence that I had on Wednesday in LA? To pay the saddler for my mistress's trap. The saddler took it, sir. I kept it not.
I am not in a playful humor now. Tell me, don't dally, where is the money? You know, we being strangers here, how dare you trust so great a responsibility in another's custody?
I ask that you joke, sir. As you sit at dinner from my mistress, to you I dash. If I return, I shall be dashed indeed, for she will score your fault upon my head. Methinks your mouth, like mine, should be your clock, and strike you home without a messenger.
Come, Romeo, come. These jokes poor timing. Reserve them for a merrier hour than this. Where is the gold I put in your charge?
Me, sir? Why, you gave me no gold.
Come on, sir, knave, be gone, be done with your foolishness and tell me how you dispose of your charge.
My charge but to fetch you from the mart, home to your house, the Phoenix, sir, to dine. My mistress and her sister waits for you.
Now, as I am a Christian, answer me, in what safe place have you hidden my money? Or shall I break that merry head of yours that stands on tricks when I am indisposed? Where is the 1,000 marks you received from me?
I have some marks of yours upon my head, some of your mistress marks upon my shoulder, but not 1,000 marks between the both. If I should pay those marks back, your worship perhaps will not bear them patiently.
Your mistress's marks? What mistresses do you have, slave?
Your worship's wife, my mistress at the Phoenix, she who fasts until you come home to dinner and prays that you will hurry yourself home to dinner.
So you will mock me to my face? Refuse me? There, take that, sir knave.
What means you, sir? For God's sake, hold your hands. No, you will not, sir. Then I will take my heels.
I'll be damned. By some ruse or scheme, the villain has taken all my money. You know, they say this town is full of frauds, nimble jugglers that deceive the eye, dark working sorcerers that trick the mind, soul killing witches that deform the body, disguised cheaters, twittering hoaxers, and many such like leechers of sin. You know, if this is true, I will be gone sooner. I'll go to the centaur to find a slave. I greatly fear my money is not safe.
Yes, y'all, come on, acting. We love it. Bravo, 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 friends. Thank you so much for doing that. What I'm curious about with this scene, and I guess comedy of errors in general, and I should have said at the beginning that Briawna was reading Romeo, Dromio of Ephesus, correct? Is that the way it was? Yes. And then TaiReikca was reading Antipholus of Syracuse. So if you don't know what that means, go watch Comedy of Errors and then come back. So what I'm curious about with this scene is language versus performance. I'm really interested in this, and this has already kind of come up in discussion here, which I think is cool. Like, what makes this a comedy, right? What in the language makes it comedic? Like, all of us here have had experience with Shakespeare and breaking down Shakespeare and scansion and language and diction and all of those things. So what in this scene like pops in the language? And then what do we feel like we as artists, and particularly in this case, artists of color, can bring to the comedy of a scene like this?
I think I think the language, the comedy is already in the language, and all we have to do is literally just be truthful be truthful in the moment. And I think that's part of what makes it so funny is that in this scene, like, Romeo genuinely does not know what Antipholus is talking about. But in Antipholus's mind, it's like, no, I just saw you. You know what I'm talking about. So it's like they're both operating from a truthful place and from what they know to be true, but they have no idea that this is not your guy. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's just I think it's just already there, and then just living truthfully into it just makes it funny.
I second that. I feel like the language, especially for comedy of errors, I feel like the language really tells you about the characters. Like, the language tells you so much about who the characters are, how they walk through the world. Even Ephesus Dromio and Syracusian Dromio, though they are similar, their styles of humor and deflection and coping very different, and that tells you a lot about especially the twins, like how they talk. The language tells you so much about them.
It's a situational comedy, right? Like, where we get the term sitcom, right? So the mistaken identity, the sort of absurd, there's a shipwreck and the twins are separated and blah, blah, blah. It's all baked in to the text. So like Ty is right when they're like, the comedy is in the text. And then what furthers the humor is how the actors commit to it and the choices a director might make in terms of the physical comedy or something like that. What is something that, like, I'm always talking to actors about is in terms of point of view. Like, I like a lot of point of view. And I think that might just even have to come from being a person of color, that I like a lot of point of view. Like, every word should have a taste. So how does it taste? And you saw that even just with Bree and Ty. I'm calling them the nicknames that I've been given permission to. Everybody else should respect the names on the screen because you're not family yet. But but you could hear it even in their delivery, the point of view that they were putting on the word, the way the words taste right? And I think that that is something that starts to become like the nuances that might reverberate more in certain cultural contexts, right? Is the spin that we put on words, right? That like we might have a few extra words for money, right? A little scratch paper, right? And then Christina could invite us in by making those substitutions in her translation. Or we can give it that meaning, right? You know, so we could take a word like cheddar and use all of its meaning in the spirit of Shakespeare. I mean, I think that's what Shakespeare will want us to do, right? That's why there's so much scatological humor in these plays too. There's lots of anatomical jokes about anatomy, sexual genitalia. And so I think in the spirit of Shakespeare, he would want us to be having that good fun by layering so much meaning on the text. And that's where I think the intersection of how it's written and how it's performed, how you can really unlock unique things when you invite certain actors to play.
Yes, I love that. And let me see if I can articulate all of my thoughts here. But another thing that came up in the other conversation with it is this idea of how people make Shakespeare so precious. It's like this precious thing. And it's like, oh, we can't mess with it. Like it's precious. It's like on this higher pedestal or whatever. And a couple of things that came up for me while y'all were talking was this idea of like what Dawn Monique said around, it's like, it's a sitcom. We know what a sitcom is, right? Like we understand like what that is now. It's like relevant to now. And Shakespeare, we know that Shakespeare was writing for then. He was super modern playwright that was like taking references from everything that was happening in real time and making people laugh because there were like real references that they like heard on the street yesterday. Do you know what I mean? And so why do we feel like Shakespeare is this precious thing when really we can, like Dawn Monique said, it's public domain. We can bring our own references, linguistic references, cultural references into what is happening right now with us doing these plays. And so a question I have around the translation of these plays, right? I've talked to some other playwrights, specifically ones who have translated comedies, who have said that it was really hard to translate the jokes in the play because they were so of Shakespeare's time, like the at the time modern references that Shakespeare had, like we don't understand today. And so I'm curious also in the reading of this Comedy of Errors translation and the playing of it, if you ever felt like there were moments when you were like, ooh, this is really hard to play comedically, because it's just like a different, like it's calling back to a different time. Or did Christina Anderson really like update all of the comedy in the play and the rhythms, right? So much of comedy is rhythm too, right? How did that feel?
I think she did a really good job of translating, because and I don't know about you, Briawna or Dawn, but reading through it, I didn't feel like there was a joke that I didn't get. I think I was able to catch everything, and there wasn't anything where I was like, oh, that must have been something back then. So I think she did a really good job of translating it to for us.
Here. I second that. I feel like it's right, nail on the head. Like you get exactly what it is every time. You're like, oh, this is a joke about genitalia. Great. Yep. Heard that. We're still making those jokes today. So it's still pretty relevant.
I feel like every time I work on Shakespeare with like a young, like emerging artist client, I feel like every time I'm like, so this is a sex joke. And they're always like, what? Wait, it's Shakespeare. And I'm like, listen, like it's this half of Shakespeare is just like one big sex joke.
Yes. And in the tragedies too, right? Like Romeo and Juliet is so much sex jokes. I don't want to get too academic, but when I just want to jump in to say that like Comedy of Errors, right? First of all, Shakespeare was a radical adapter. So I think I think he'd be like absolutely here for it. He was a radical adapter. Comedy of Errors is straight up reboot of a Roman comedy, The Twin Menachmi. It's a comedy by Plautus. Shakespeare did not invent the story. He borrowed it and he updated it. I think he would want us to do that. And the Roman comedies are exactly what our template for TV sitcoms is based on, the Roman comedies. But you know why in theater we don't do the Roman comedies that often? Because they were topical. So we don't understand, because they were satire, they were topical, they were talking about figures, politicians at the time. So we don't understand them. So Shakespeare did exactly like you said. He took it, he updated it, he made it so that his audience would understand it. Why shouldn't we do the exact same thing? Why shouldn't we take it? We have a lot of appreciation for it. We're like, oh, Shakespeare was really onto something. All this rhyming verse, ha, 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 that's good fun, great. But where the comedy might just not land, where it might be too antiquated, where something might be too topical and we've lost that reference, why not just plug in something that does the trick for us? And this goes right back to how I just need the gatekeepers to understand that the closest thing we have right now to Shakespeare in our contemporary like society is hip hop, right? So Shakespeare was like sampling beats. Just think of it that way. Like Shakespeare was sampling beats. And so if a young person like Ty can find their way into Shakespeare through Tupac, like let that happen. So if a young person can find their way to Shakespeare through a play on translation, where the first rule, I've heard Louis say it so many times, the first rule was do no harm. So nobody set out to butcher the plays. They just set out to like take those little nuggets that maybe have been lost to time. We don't know that word. The meaning is so obscure to us now. And just plug it in, right? And I think that for Play On, they have like Louis and the Play On team have found some of the most amazing living playwrights writing in the English language today. The most amazing, like a King Lear by Marcus Gardley. Hello, I'm all the way here for it. So when you take a play like Comedy of Errors and you give it to Christina Anderson, who is a queer Black woman, to just kind of be the dramatist in the room, that opens so many doors for so many other humans that maybe would not have had a point of entry, right? Like there are some people that are going to read it just because you say, well, Christina Anderson is a queer Black woman. And they're going to be like, oh, word? Oh, okay, not a white guy that's been dead for 400 years, but like a living woman. I probably could find her on the Facebook or Twitter right now and hit her up and ask her, why'd you choose this word? I'm here for it. I'm all the way here for it.
Yes, and like another thing that comes up all the time when I'm speaking to like emerging BIPOC artists is they also, like many of y'all said in the intros, at first were like, no, Shakespeare is not for me. But then they saw Kenny Leon's production of Much Ado About Nothing in the park, and literally it like blew up any sort of armor that they had about Shakespeare. And many people have many opinions about that show. I have my own opinions about that show, but does it even matter what my opinions or criticisms are of the show? Because it opened up so many eyes and doors for BIPOC people who were like, specifically Black people that I've talked to, who were like, that was the moment that I said, oh, Shakespeare is for me. Like, I want to learn this. I want to know this because I want to do that. Right. It's like, it's really revolutionary. And Dawn, don't worry, I'm going to email this whole conversation directly to all the gatekeepers. Like, listen.
Well, here's my thing, right? Like, Shakespeare is not going anywhere. Shakespeare is the only named author in the core curriculum in the public schools in the US. Like, we're sort of stuck with Shakespeare. There's this whole like Shakespeare the Supreme thing that I'm trying to wrestle with. I'm trying to work against. And my sort of kind of radical thought is, I'm from California, right? Which was an open carry state until the Black Panthers started openly carrying, right? So here's what we gotta do. Let us have y'all Shakespeare, and then you'll either like decentralize it. You'll be like, oh, we don't want y'all openly carrying Shakespeare. So we're gonna decentralize it, or you're gonna realize the gifts that we bring to it, and we're gonna all then be better ambassadors for the work. So I'm like, let's just take it and roll with it. And I'm not kidding. People are setting Pericles, people are doing Star Wars Pericles. So like, really, we can't do a hip hop much ado. We can't, that Merry Wives, that's the public is doing right now. I obviously not seeing it, but all I'm hearing is fire, fire, fire. So like, I think people could stand to learn something by just letting go of their precious canon and seeing what it's like to be embodied by other people, by people who are not white, by casts that are not predominantly white males.
They did it.
A lot to be learned.
They can do it with Shakespeare too. It's possible.
Yeah. And also, I mean, this is a whole other, like, don't even get me started, but like how Tai was talking about, like the Moor characters. So we know there's like Othello and Aaron and like the Prince of Morocco, but like Cleopatra, but also just like Hermia in Midsummer, like there's a reason he keeps calling her Tawny. Like, let's not negate the fact that he literally calls her Tawny. What? Rosalind in Love's Labour. Like, I think there's a whole lot of other characters in Shakespeare that actually are melanated. And, you know, I'll leave it at, I'll just use the word melanated. I'll let that be my word of choice. And the gifts that come from actually, you know, how does it cut different if you actually have a Hermia who is a woman of color, who is tawny, and he starts calling her an Ethiop, right? Then you actually have something to wrestle with. Then you actually have to say, do I leave that in the script or do I take that out? Do I actually set this couple up to have to deal with the fact that he has now used a racial slur on this woman? Like, or do I take it out? And when we just kind of cast these shows without a mind towards how race and ethnicity happen, then we either just sort of like over sanitize it, which is definitely a mistake I've made, trying to be very PC, because that's a point of pride for me. But just cast a tawny woman and have the conversation in rehearsal, and as a company, make the decision of where that Ethiop line sits.
I think TaiReikca said this earlier about like, let's have the conversations. And that's one of my favorite things about the whole play on experience and experiment, is that what happens when you translate and do no harm to the script, right? But you are translating what Shakespeare literally wrote, is it exposes the problems. There's a lot of problematic shit in Shakespeare's plays. And we've been allowed for so long to just like skate over it because nobody understands what we're saying anyway, like whatever, like, or that meant something else. And it's like, no, once it's translated and it's in the words that we use every day, it's like, oh, we have to deal with this. We absolutely have to. Which I just like really, really appreciate. Briawna and TaiReikca, I'm curious if you feel like there are any moments in Comedy of Errors that stand out as like, oh, wow, I didn't know that's what Shakespeare was saying, like any problematic things that have stood out, if any.
I would say, I mean, there's always problematic things in every Shakespeare play. There's always going to be something. A conversation that we had early on, which I appreciated, was how the use of the term slave and like what that means and what that meant then and what it means now and the weight of that word. And so I was very thankful that was one of the first conversations that we had surrounding the characters, because I think it's easy to just be like, well, you know, it's a different time. Shakespeare wrote it, whatever. But actually, language is powerful. And that's why you should always use specific language and think about the way that the language is going to affect the audience and how language and casting go hand in hand. And so I would say that that was one moment that I was like, yes, how do we approach this? Like, how do we look at this, especially with an all BIPOC cast of femme or non-binary identifying persons?
I second that. Yeah, there was besides the slave, I think there wasn't really a lot of triggering language in this translation for me, at least. Or of course, I can go back and reread it, and then I'll actually be looking for it, and I could find something. But yeah, and I think just how we set it up, the world in which we set it up in. We set the play up on a HBCU campus, and like kind of like in Greek life. And at least how I've been seeing the Dromios, they're like online in a way. They're not like, they don't have the letters yet. So in that sense, it's almost like the term slave is almost like crab. Like if you ever seen Drumline, you know, they call the new people in the band, they're crabs. That was also a thing in my HBCU, you know. So that's kind of where my mind just goes to when we use that language in this translation. But yeah, like you said, it's definitely something like you have to have that conversation, and you have to like see like, okay, what are you trying to say? And then also have the conversation, like, how is this going to make your artist feel if they have to say this a certain amount of times a day, like for 5 or 6 days a week, and like, you know, what that could take on, like what that could mean for them mentally, you know what I'm saying? Because you still want to care for your actors. So it's very important to like talk about that. Like, okay, what are we saying? Okay, is this the world in which we're living in, to where like we can keep the word the same and it not have the same meaning as it would like in the modern sense, or like the first thing we think about? Or is this something that like, no, we may need to change this word? And then also like, who is speaking this word, and how is it going to affect you? Because we also have to take care of you. If we want you to take care of the story for 8 shows a week, we need to make sure you're taken care of, and you're not doing something that's doing you a disservice mentally and spiritually and emotionally as well.
Yes. Amazing, y'all. Yeah, and I just want to shout out Black Girls Love the BARD, who has an intimacy director as a part of the creative team, Rachel Finley, who is the director of curriculum at the Blueprint, actually, too. So Rachel's incredible. So, you know, creating these spaces where the actors can feel safe, and we're, you know, figuring out how do we make everybody, the people speaking the words, the people who are being spoken to, even in like a Zoom environment, right? Language can also be violence. And the conversation that we had earlier this week was all about violence in comedy and violence in the show, because that I know that was something that Rael, the director, and Corinne, the dramaturg, kind of pulled out of the script immediately. There's a lot of like Antipholus beating Romeo, which we actually saw in the scene that they just did. And like, what does that mean when it's an all POC group of people, right? So definitely check out that. The special guest was Denise Divya Johnson. They are an intimacy coordinator of color. And so it was like a really, really cool conversation, and goes a little bit more in depth about this particular thing, which I think is just so fascinating. And with the translation, it's just like so fascinating. Play on is the best. But I would love to switch gears here, and for kind of our last little part of this, just talk about, not just because I think it's so important, joy, right? Like joy in doing a comedy. Like, why do we need comedies right now? I think at any point in time, right? Being a BIPOC person, we need places and spaces where we can feel joy, where we can experience joy. but especially in this last like year and a half, I guess kind of almost 2 years at this point when everything has just been so crazy, like how are y'all in your personal lives as artists and as people finding joy in your life right now? And how are y'all in these spaces where we're working, like holding on to joy? That's my question.
I'm going to lead with, it's starting to probably be a little bit cliche right now, but joy is a radical act. I think in particular for Black folks, Indigenous and people of color folks, joy is really a radical act. And I think especially right now, you know, over a year ago when George Floyd was murdered and then Breonna Taylor was murdered and the racial uprisings really kind of resurged and then like corporate entities tried to like prove their like woke status, right? And so like all the streaming platforms had like a curated list of like Black things. It was the most trauma porn lists of all time ever. And it's really like, yes, these are true things. These are historical things. These are things that happened. Great. Yes, we want to see Michael Bay Jordan in Mercy. Like, yes, we want to all of that. But also we need spaces to like laugh and love. Like we live full ass lives, right? Like we fall in love, we have romantic partners, we have families, we go to cookouts, we cry, we sing, we dance, like we live full lives. And you know, for myself personally, I am descended from enslaved Africans in this country who had their drums literally taken from. I know people think that this is just like some like allegorical thing that like Black people say. No, it's actually like a true actual thing that like written into law, that we couldn't have musical instruments, we couldn't congregate, we couldn't dance, we literally couldn't dance. So joy for people of color in 2021 and 2022 is a radical act, and we need it. We need it because to continue to do the work of kind of sort of decolonizing ourselves and staying in the fight and seeking justice, we also have to have moments of just like laugh out loud community. We have to have like moments of embrace, sex, food, all of it. Like we need all of it to be full in our humanity. And sometimes I think for me using I statements, I carry a little bit of guilt around that, like taking that pause to want to laugh, but the mind, the spirit, the body, it needs that, right? And laughter works the exact same muscles as crying. So it's good to just switch it up, a little bit and
but do
engage the core for some laughter instead of just like sobbing because the world's a dumpster fire right now. My goodness. So I'm here for the joy.
Yes, to all of that. I would say that finding moments of joy, it has been something that I've been actively searching for and like going for, especially when all of that, it was trauma porn was coming out, and sitting with, I have a group of POC women who I talk to. We have our own little group chat, and we had a lot of conversations around this and about the fact that all of those lists that they were putting out and a lot of the conversations and this newfound interest in Black liberation it's not for us. It's not for us. It's for them. It's for white guilt. It's for trendiness, unfortunately, which is why personally, this is I statement, all of my activism is not on social media. I don't talk about any of the things that I do. I don't talk about any of the protests I go to. I don't talk about any of the organizations that I work with you can find links in my link tree, and I talk to people on personal levels. But I had to take a step away from it on social media because it was so blaringly performative in a lot of ways. So in doing that, I took a step aside and became a part of this group of mixed Black, all over the place women who are amazing, because we were like, we need to have moments of joy. Well, so whether it be, you know, we sending each other memes, we're having game nights, we're doing whatever, purposely making sure that we set time aside to find joy. And also, as a part of finding joy, allowing ourselves to not have to be excellent all the time. Our group is literally called Black Mediocrity because we are just like, just let us be, just let us exist. And so I feel like part of finding joy for me has been allowing myself to be mediocre once in a while and just like exist. And of course, you know, I have my art and my music, and I think that finding joy in the things that you love and taking a step away is important, because we are a part of the conversation and the trauma 100% of the time. We don't have a choice in that. We could, but you know, acknowledging that that's going to be there, but I'm going to do this right now, and finding joy in each other, I think is a very beautiful thing. And especially as an artist, like I find so much joy just logging into rehearsals for Black Girls Love the BARD, because I get to look around and see all shades and sizes and identities. And I'm like, this is joy right here. Being able to exist without any kind of weight to be different or to have to present art in a certain kind of way, or have to struggle to be understood or feel seen or feel heard. That is joy to me. So.
James Baldwin said, and I'm total, like, this isn't word for word, but he said, to be Black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. And in this day where everything is on social media, we can find out things instantly. It is literally a constant state of rage because of everything that is happening racially, things that happen in the LGBTQ community, and things that happen to women. It's just like, what the is going on? So in that case, Dawn and Briawna are right. Joy is a revolutionary act. To have joy, to find happiness throughout all of this bullshit that's going on, it's healing, and it's how we continue forward. Like and I speak, like, I'm really speaking to myself, because I have a lot of rage. Like I feel that I got my grandfather's temper. He passed before I was born. My mother went to his funeral pregnant with me, and my grandma said, that means your baby's going to have an old soul. And I think I got part of his old soul, and I got part of his rage. So like, there was like one point I was just so freaking mad, and I'm like, what, do we need to go out there and just start like killing people ourselves? Like, is that going to get y'all to, is that going to get y'all to understand? You know, so, and I found, and that was weighing heavy on me. And so like, that's what we all deal with. We cannot deal with it like that. We cannot just, it's so, yes, everything's fucked up, but if we don't, sorry, pardon my vernacular, but if we don't make space to be happy, there's no point of this. There's no point of living don't find a space to rejoice, like, how do we get through? How do we know that there's something else out there? You know, even in enslavement times, those weren't fun times. Those were terrible times. Those were traumatic times. Those times left so much trauma on our ancestors that they have literally passed down their mother's trauma onto their children. And then their children have their grandmother's trauma plus their mother's trauma. And then we have just keep passing it down. But if we don't start to find the joy, we won't heal from it. Our joy is how we heal. Our joy is what carries us through. Even in enslavement, they had to find something to find joy. You know what I'm saying? And even when they tried to take it away, we still found joy in something. Like, yeah, we doing this, but we're going to find joy in each other. We're going to sneak away when we can, and we're going to at least get a little clap and a stomp going. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to keep going. And it's because of that spirit that we're still here today. You know what I'm saying? So how dare we not practice joy? We must. That is how we're going to keep going forward. That is how we are going to say, weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning time or in the rising, however you address the AM, you know? So yeah, like, so, and having spaces like this, you know, where we can have conversations about Shakespeare and we not have to feel like, oh, we're going to be that person in the room if we speak out and ask these questions about this. It's like, no, this language is triggering to me. Okay, no, press pause. Let's discuss it. Let's see how can we make it not triggering for you. You know what I'm saying? And there's joy in being able to do that and to have knowing that you can do that. You know what I'm saying? And if anybody can find joy in anything, it's us. And it's just like, we come from a people who find joy in even when they've tried to take it away from us. You know, like the whole minstrel show the minstrel shows that were going on back in the 20s and 30s and stuff. Part of that came about is a white man saw a black man having joy, dancing and singing for no one but himself. And then he took that and then he made a mockery out of it and for white people to laugh at. Even then they tried to take our joy again, but still, no, we still found a way, like, no, that's may be what you're going to do, but we're still going to sing because this is where our joy comes. And that was a revolutionary act. The fact that they used our singing and dancing and made fun of us, but now, like, who rocking the singing and dancing entertainment industry? You know what I'm saying? We taking that back. You know what I'm saying? Shakespeare didn't write his plays for Black people. He wrote it for white people. However, what are we doing? We got play on. We're getting black playwrights to translate that. No, we're taking this joy back. You know what I'm saying? And that's the revolution. You know what I'm saying? That's the revolution when we say, like, no, we're going to take this back, or no, we're going to create it ourselves, or no, we are it ourselves. There was an episode of All American in this last season, and I remember there was a lot going on, and I was just so mad. And my best friend was telling me, like, boo, you have got to find the joy. You cannot let this consume you. And I was just so mad. I'm like, ah. And so I'm just like, forget it. I'm rolling a blunt and I'm watching All American. And I turn it on, and this episode, and it was, of course, after the episode where a teenage girl had been, or a young woman had been shot by the police, and he said, and there was a lot of rage going on with people getting on the two main characters on a thing. Sorry, their names are slipping my mind right now, but like there was a lot coming down on it, but the guy was like, nah, that stuff will be there tomorrow, but right now we have to make time for the joy, because without it, what else do we have? And so what did they do? They went and celebrated his mom for graduating college while she's a single mother working a full-time job and raising two teenage boys, you know? And I remember that, watching that scene, and I just started like just bawling, crying, because it was so beautiful. There's the beauty that's in joy, the beauty that, like, even despite everything that was going on in their neighborhood, they still found the time to celebrate a Black queen, to give her flowers, to acknowledge her and what she has done for their lives, and to just laugh together and commune together and to have good times. And that's the revolution, because that's how we keep going. That's how we survive, and that's how we don't fall. So I think I just talked a whole bunch. I'm going to digress and just calm down now. So
that was so beautiful. Thank you. I'm getting emotional and I'm just very inspired by y'all. And this conversation brought me a lot of joy. Thank you. I think that's a great place to end it. That was really, really powerful and incredible. I just want to leave space in case anybody has anything else that they want to say. Any quick little anything?
Nemuna, what's bringing you joy, sis?
What's bringing me joy? I just love the work, y'all. I love the work. I love the people I get to collaborate with. I love obviously this particular conversation and just everything else that's happening. I think it's so easy, right, to get wrapped up in like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed. The world is so blah. But when you really stop and you're like, wow, the gratitude, right? The gratitude that I have for the spaces that I get to be in, for the challenges that I get to overcome every day, and the people that help me along the way is just like so powerful. And y'all are a part of that today. So thank you. Anything else, y'all?
Just thank you for putting this together and having us here. This is so lovely.
I second that.
Absolutely.
And can I just ask a question? Dawn, when are you having auditions for the next show you're going to direct? Because I would love
you have your cast right here, Dawn.
I want to be in the room where that happens. Please.
Oh, I'm always thinking about my peeps. And I'm always casting something. That's for sure. So you're in there. You're locked in.
Good question, TaiReikca. We love it. Awesome. So let me just shout out real quick. If you have not yet signed up to see the Comedy of Errors virtual reading, please do it. Tickets are still available. If you go to the Black Girls Love the Bard Instagram page, it is at Black BLK Girls Love LUV the Bard on Instagram. Go to the link in the bio and get tickets. They start at $5 so that it can be affordable and accessible to the community. But obviously, if you want to give more, you can. Please continue to support BIPOC organizations. It's so important. The government doesn't do it, so help us out, y'all. And yeah, again, there was another conversation that was dropped on Monday about the violence in Comedy of Errors, but it's become so much more than that, and it's really beautiful. So definitely check that out as well. It's on the Black Girls Love the Bard YouTube page. So yeah, thank y'all. You're all the best. Let's have another convo, even if it's not like live for anybody to see, we'll do it in the rehearsal room with Dawn.
Thank you, Nemuna, and thanks to all the folks at Black Girls Love the Bard for hosting us.
Yes, we love them. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.